I was kneeling on the carpet of my home office, surrounded by stacks of old tax returns and manila folders. I was going through a heavy fireproof lockbox, trying to locate a specific property deed, when I found a small sealed envelope at the very bottom. It was an anniversary card from my first marriage, dated 3 years before the divorce was finalized. I opened it and read the message she had written. It was not angry, it was just incredibly sad. She wrote about feeling invisible, about living in a house with a man who felt like a stranger, and she asked me to just tell her the truth about why I was pulling away. I sat there on the floor, 58 years old at the time, holding that card, and I felt a wave of profound, suffocating guilt. The truth was that my physical hardware had been failing for over a year. I was completely impotent. But instead of sitting down and having an honest conversation about my mechanical failure, I had built a fortress of dark, silent secrets to protect my ego. I fed her excuses. I hid my panic. And those secrets, far more than the physical failure itself, are what ultimately burned the marriage to the ground. If you are watching this right now and you are currently hiding a failing physical drive behind a wall of quiet excuses, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I know exactly the kind of deep, isolating shame that makes a man want to cover his tracks when his body stops responding. I know how easy it is to lie to the woman you love to protect your own pride. I'm going to break down the exact lies we tell, why they are so destructive, and what I eventually figured out about repairing the actual machine. I promise you, what your body is experiencing is a mechanical issue, but the secrets you are keeping will turn it into a permanent disaster. I spent the rest of that afternoon sitting in my office, completely dismantling my own past behavior. I realized that when a man experiences impotence, his central nervous system registers it as a massive survival threat. We go into a state of chronic fight or flight. And when you decide to hide that failure from your wife, you lock your body into a permanent state of sympathetic overdrive. You are constantly running the engine with the alarm blaring. That chronic internal panic dumps massive amounts of cortisol into your bloodstream. Cortisol is the biological enemy of testosterone and blood flow. It literally constricts the blood vessels in your pelvic region and shuts down the hormonal factory floor. By keeping this secret, I was physically guaranteeing that my impotence would become permanent. I had to fundamentally change the way I viewed my physical failure, and it required confronting 5 specific dark secrets that men use to hide their condition and replacing them with absolute mechanical truth. The first secret you must never use as a shield is the lie of professional exhaustion. This is the most common defense mechanism. We tell our wives that we are just too stressed from work, too tired from the commute, or too overwhelmed by financial pressure to be intimate. We use our role as a provider as an alibi for our physical collapse. Women have a razor-sharp instinct for authenticity. When you tell her it is just work stress, she internalizes it as rejection. Mechanically, chronic work stress does destroy your drive, but using it as a permanent excuse just allows you to ignore the fuel leak. You have to stop using your career as a hiding place and start managing your cortisol. I had to institute a hard, non-negotiable boundary between my corporate life and my home life. I stopped checking emails after dinner. I stopped bringing the adrenaline of the sales floor into my living room. I forced my nervous system to power down, so the parasympathetic system, the only system that allows blood vessels to dilate and an erection to form, could finally come online. You have to give the physical infrastructure permission to relax. The second secret is the dark habit of solo performance testing. When a man fails in the bedroom with his partner, he often retreats in secret to see if the equipment still works when he is alone. He relies on highly stimulating digital screens to force a mechanical response. Never keep this secret and never engage in this habit. It completely rewires the ignition switch in your brain. You're training your nervous system to require massive artificial dopamine spikes to achieve blood flow. When you return to the real quiet intimacy of your bedroom with your wife, the natural friction is no longer enough to trigger the valves. I had to completely eliminate artificial digital stimulation from my life. I had to force my dopamine receptors to reset. I started doing heavy lower body resistance training instead, deep squats and heavy sled pushes. I forced my body to generate real systemic blood pressure and natural nitric oxide through physical exertion, rather than relying on a cheap digital trigger. You have to rebuild the natural hydraulic demand from the ground up. If the mechanical logic of abandoning these destructive secrets and fixing the actual infrastructure makes sense to you, or if you are completely exhausted from maintaining a wall of lies in your own home, hit the like button right now. It is incredibly important that we get this specific reality check in front of other men who are currently sitting in silence, destroying their marriages because they are too proud to admit their engine needs repair. We have to share the truth about what actually works. The third secret you must never deploy is the silent implication that the physical chemistry between you and your wife has just naturally faded. Many men, in an attempt to deflect their own failure, quietly project the blame onto their partner. We become emotionally distant, implying that the spark is simply gone. This is a brutal, toxic lie that destroys a woman's confidence. The mechanical truth is usually that your own internal signaling is completely choked off by physical tension. Decades of sitting in office chairs creates a permanent tightening spasm in the pelvic floor. You are literally strangling the primary arteries that deliver fuel to the region. I was walking around with my internal parking brake fully engaged, blaming the car for not accelerating. I had to learn to consciously release that tension. I began doing deep, targeted mobility work on my living room floor, specifically focusing on breathing into the lower abdomen and forcing that dense muscle tissue to drop. When you release the physical tourniquet, the blood can finally flow, and you stop blaming your partner for your own blocked pipes. The fourth secret is hiding a chemical crutch. Never let your wife discover a hidden stash of pharmacy pills in your travel bag. When she finds them, and she always will, the betrayal is not that you need help. The betrayal is the deception. But, more importantly, relying on a synthetic blue pill in secret actively accelerates the decline of your natural hardware. The pill is a chemical hotwire. It forces a valve open while completely ignoring the health of the internal Teflon lining of your blood vessels. Over time, that lining atrophies because you are no longer naturally producing the nitric oxide required to keep it flexible. I had to throw the pills away and rebuild my vascular lining properly. I started consuming large amounts of dietary nitrates like dark leafy greens and beets, providing my body with the heavy raw materials it needed to manufacture its own chemical gas. I had to force my own factory to start producing again, instead of relying on a synthetic override that was slowly destroying my baseline capacity. The fifth and final secret is the lie of silent resignation. It is the secret where you decide entirely on your own that your physical prime is over, and you simply stop trying without ever informing your partner of your decision. You accept impotence as a condition of aging and expect her to just quietly live with the consequences. Never make this unilateral decision. It is an abdication of your responsibility as a man. The mechanical reality is that aging does not equal impotence. Impotence is a byproduct of thick, sugary blood and an overworked filtration system. I had to clean my internal oil filter. I drastically reduced my carbohydrate intake to stop the glycation process that was thickening my blood and corroding my microscopic nerves. I cut out the evening alcohol to let my liver finally clear the backlog of toxins. By thinning the hydraulic fluid and cleaning the filter, the internal pressure could finally build up without resistance, getting the cortisol under control, resetting the dopamine receptors, releasing the pelvic tension, providing the right raw materials, and cleaning the oil filter completely transformed my physical capacity. I stopped hiding and started doing the actual maintenance. But I am an absolute realist about the biological friction of repairing an older machine. When you subject your endocrine system to years of chronic stress and toxic secrets, the internal communication lines get heavily corroded, and the stress hormones create a massive chemical imbalance that discipline alone cannot always reverse. I realized that to fully support the infrastructure I was rebuilding, I needed highly specific internal reinforcement. I absolutely refused to return to synthetic pharmacy options. I went looking for a natural protocol that directly addressed the chemical leaks caused by stress. The daily formulation I use relies heavily on fenugreek. This compound specifically targets and blocks the enzyme that converts your hard-earned testosterone into estrogen, an imbalance that happens constantly when an older man is living under heavy stress and carrying excess weight. It plugs the leak in the fuel line. The protocol also utilizes tribulus. This acts as a direct chemical messenger, stimulating the exact hormone that signals your testes to wake up and start producing testosterone again. It acts at the absolute beginning of the chain, turning the factory floor back on naturally. I never tell another man what he should add to his routine, but if you want to look at the exact formulation I rely on to stop the estrogen conversion and signal my production lines, I put a link in the pinned comment right below this video. You can also simply scan the QR code you see on your screen right now. I spent months cutting through the garbage in the supplement industry to find a clean mechanism that I actually trust. Because here is the deepest, hardest truth about impotence in marriage. A good woman will stand by you through illness, through financial ruin, and through physical decline. But she will not stand by a man who lies to her. The secrets are what kill the respect. When you hide your mechanical failures behind a wall of ego and excuses, you isolate her in her own home. When I finally stopped treating my failing body as a dark secret and started treating it as a mechanical problem that required my aggressive attention, everything changed. I did not just get my physical drive back, I got my integrity back. I became a man who could look his partner in the eye with absolute clarity, knowing I was not hiding a single thing. Many men quietly watch their marriages disintegrate because they are terrified to admit that their physical equipment needs repair. They cling to their pride and let the house burn down around them. You do not have to accept the secrets or the silence as your permanent reality. You have the absolute authority to fix the machine and tell the truth. Tell me in the comments, what is the biggest excuse you have used to avoid intimacy when your hardware was actually failing? I read every single comment and I know exactly how heavy it feels to carry those lies around. Do not spend another year feeding your wife excuses while your internal infrastructure slowly rusts away. The longer you let chronic stress and poor habits dictate your physical reality, the harder it is to rebuild the trust and the blood flow. Start managing your cortisol and moving heavy loads tomorrow morning. Throw the chemical crutches in the trash. And if you want to give your internal engine the specific cellular support it needs to block the estrogen leak and signal natural production, look at the protocol I use. The link is right there in the pinned comment below, and the QR code is on your screen. Take a serious look at the biological mechanisms of the ingredients. Decide for yourself if the logic makes sense for the exact physical frustration you are trying to hide right now. I am Cole Harrison. Keep doing the work.